Welcome to A State of Mind, the podcast that brings together consciousness, meditation, mindfulness, psychology, psychedelics, and so much more in pursuit of this mystery we call life. This is Julian Royce. Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I have a great conversation recorded for you today. First, a little housekeeping. I have actually been quite sick this week. I may in fact have COVID. I'm not sure at this point. I got tested yesterday morning, but have not heard back yet. So I've been resting a lot and feeling some pain in my body, but thankfully feel well enough to record this today and get this podcast episode out. I'm grateful it's not worse for me, and I know a lot of people have had it worse. But if it does end up being COVID, I do feel frustrated to have avoided it for so long, only to now succumb in April of 2021. I was hoping that we would be past the pandemic by this point, but obviously we're not. In fact, for whatever it's worth, I personally know more people who have gotten coronavirus in the last 3 weeks or so than in all of 2020, which is kind of bizarre, but for whatever reason, that is my reality. In the background, you can hear some music that I recorded with my friend Stephen Newman, and I think we recorded this almost a year ago, but I recently rediscovered it. And if you are watching the video, you will notice I am wearing a brand new color royal blue, A State of Mind t-shirt. Yes, we have them in blue now. I think they look really great. If you would like one, send us a message at astateofmindplay.com, as well as stickers and our other t-shirts that we have. If you're getting something of value from this podcast, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/astateofmind. We really appreciate every single dollar that comes in. It makes a huge difference to us. And we are sending benefits out to subscribers, like more of the music that I've recorded, artwork, some extended conversations from some of our guests. I'm going to be unveiling more things like that in the future. And one other thing, some of you may have noticed that I uploaded a video to our YouTube channel, A State of Mind YouTube channel, and it is a guided meditation and this exercise called the container exercise, which is from somatic trauma-informed therapy, but it really is something that could potentially be helpful to anyone. So I wanted to share that with anyone who would be interested in it. And I'm planning to put a few more videos like that up in the near future around mindfulness, meditation, and specifically around therapy, trauma-informed therapy. And you can learn more about my work in that realm at astateofmindcounseling.org. So today, I'm speaking with Ori. Ori is someone who lives here in Boulder, Colorado, and they offer coaching, mentoring, and guiding. He also leads groups, and in the past has led a group around non-duality. And it's something we talk about in our conversation today. This was a really interesting conversation. We touch on topics like what is spirituality, the role of being a quote-unquote seeker in your life, and making effort on one's path versus being more effortless. And Ori discusses the importance of having guides and teachers that actually see you and care about you. And I really appreciated him kind of highlighting that. I think that is important. And I think that's something that is easy to miss, or, you're not going to just get that from reading a book, for example. So he really, I think, is a fan of making that human-to-human personal connection with the teacher. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And without further ado, I bring you Ori. And I'm here today with Ori. Ori, thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And you were just telling me that you are a guide, a mentor. That's how you would describe yourself.
Yeah. It's a kind of a wide enough general term.
Yeah.
For many things that I do.
I had another therapist called Jeff James Howard on the podcast, and he is moving towards calling himself a guide instead of therapist. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it feels. It's kind of like the idea of elders. You know, you have somebody that's walked before you, and you just kind of like, you know, people come. They have pretty much a lot of the same misunderstandings that you had before.
Right.
You know, and so you kind of guide them into a reality that you kind of know. It's a good enough. And mentorship also, I kind of love that word.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah. It also gives a lot of possibilities to do a lot of things, you know, because it's not narrow.
Yeah.
So we can do, you know, we can take, walk in nature with clients.
Yeah. Maybe less preconceptions.
There's way less preconceptions. Yeah. So.
I just realized I'm going to turn this light on.
Okay.
There we go. It's getting dark out.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been in Boulder for 3 years.
Cool.
Loving it.
Where were you before this?
Well, I was born in Israel, and then when I was 30, I moved to San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And then I was there 11 years, and was in Arizona 5 years, and then eventually came here.
Nice.
I guess I was meant to be here.
Yeah.
I think so. I tried other places, didn't quite land.
This feels like home to you?
This was from the moment I stepped into Boulder. It was kind of like this is the right one.
Oh, cool! That's cool to hear.
Yeah.
Boulder's it's a unique place, and for good and bad. Like I've heard a lot of people kind of criticize it because it feels like a bubble and it feels like very insular. And
it is a bubble.
The nature is so beautiful and good people.
But it's demanding. What I like about Boulder, there's this uprightness of the mountains. So there's a harshness of the weather.
Oh yeah.
But it's I really connected to the nature about 8 months ago and really felt how it's like very upright, a little bit harsh, but has a lot of integrity. So that's the feeling I get from the land.
I like that. Yeah.
You know, which is different than something near the ocean, let's say.
Right. With like San Francisco. Right.
It's ocean, or if you go to Hawaii, places are softer sometimes. You know. This is mountain ridge.
And the wind can be so crazy here. I heard a story when I first moved here of the wind will be really intense here in town, but just above town in the mountains it's even more. 50, 60 mile.
Yeah, like a net.
Like in Netherlands. Yeah. And these people had this little tiny dog, like one of these little 5-pound dogs, and it went out on the deck, and the big windstorm came and it blew into a tree in a neighbor's yard.
The dog.
The dog literally flew through the air like 30, 40 feet into a tree. So how did you get into this calling of mentoring? Did it feel like a calling?
I come from computer science, so I didn't intend to do when I was in my 20s and I was on a professional track. I came from my dad was a professor in Israel, so what I did was study computer science. So it evolved naturally, organically as I started learning, having teachers, and eventually realized that I'm not meant to be a computer programmer, in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And so it just naturally happened, and I couldn't, I didn't want to quite take myself to another professional kind of track. Yeah. And so this just started evolving, and it's just, as opposed to the effort of being an engineer, this was just easy. It was kind of like home. Yeah.
More effortless.
Yeah, kind of like Boulder was to me. It's like, oh, this is the right thing to do. This is the right place to be.
Huh.
Oh, thank you. I don't have to effort anymore.
Cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I think efforting can be almost like an addiction that we have, right? We feel like we get trained to try really hard to do things and then to reward ourselves. And then that's something that I notice in myself and in talking with people that I work with of can you just feel okay right now? Instead of having the sense of I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then I can feel okay.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough for people.
Sometimes we had to hit our head against a wall before we stop efforting.
Yeah.
One thing I'm looking at all the books, and it kind of reminds me of my seeker days. So I have this little story from my spiritual past where I was so into seeking effort, and then I went to India and tried to find teachers, and then I met this one teacher. We didn't really get along, so he wasn't meant to be mine. But, I said, will you teach me? And he said, no, I'm not going to teach you anything. You're just a seeker. And I was like, oh, I've been doing that for the last 10, 12 years, nonstop. Even if you give me something, I won't stop. I'll just keep on running.
Well, it sounds like that you got some message there.
That was great. That was really helpful for me to stop the efforting, stop the search, and kind of give up for a while.
Interesting.
It was very important to give up for a while.
Wait, so you had like 12 years or so where you were a seeker, so to speak?
12 years, probably even more. Probably from age 24 to, I don't know, maybe, 38, yeah.
Okay, so. It's a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain, do you feel like that's like a necessary step for people in general? Or phase, I guess?
I mean, it's nice to go through it. I mean, looking back, it was kind of like a very exciting time in my life.
Cool.
Constantly taking workshops, reading books, trying to find things out. It's age appropriate, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of energy in the system.
I was trying to get something more and learn something more.
Yeah. And you also have a big engine. It's like, I have kids, right? They have to run around.
Right.
You can't, sit down. It's not going to work when you're, 7 years old.
Right.
You have to run around and then get tired to go to sleep. So, in my 20s, my body, my mind is very different than, I'm almost 50 now. It's a very different body-mind.
Interesting.
I needed to do different things. Yeah.
So maybe the energy goes down a little bit.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And also probably has to run its hero's journey a little bit.
Well, what would you say you were seeking for?
At the time, I could say I was seeking truth. That was my thing. It sounds so serious now.
Yeah.
I was seeking truth. I was like, what is the truth? And I, would read some of these books that you have here in your library. And just really seeking truth or higher self or whatever, different periods. But honestly, I really don't know. One time somebody said, right, it's funny, right? It's like somebody said to me, why are you going to India? I'm like, I don't know. When I get to India, maybe I'll know.
Wow, yeah.
Because you really don't know until you find something.
Well, there's something that moved you there, right? Some calling or some longing or some idea or inspiration. I went to India too, and I had some sense like I was supposed to go.
Yeah.
Listen to that.
Yeah. India's magical. It's different.
It's intense. Challenging.
Yeah. Were you there one time?
I was just there, but I was there for about 4 months, so it was a long time, but yeah. 4 or 5 months, yeah. And then I was in Nepal for 10 months, which Nepal is kind of like India light. It was, very much the similar culture, but it was less, I don't know what the words are, it's been a long time now. It was still polluted and crowded and all that, but it was just less dust, less pollution, if that's possible.
More organized.
A little more organized, yeah. India light, that's how I thought.
Right, India light, yeah. India itself is, I find it magical because it's messy, so you have to let go. The beautiful with India is that you have to let go, otherwise you're going to suffer, because you're not going to get what you want there.
Yeah, it forces that, yeah.
And I think also during the seeking period, you want something else. There's where you are, and in some sense, you don't like where you are.
Right.
And you want something else. You want something magical or something to happen. You want to be a butterfly from a caterpillar, and you have imagination on how that's going to happen. And
how long were you there for?
India was only twice, a month or two each time.
Okay.
Just traveling all kinds of places.
In the south or the north?
I was in Goa, then I was in, first I was actually in the north in Rishikesh, and I went all the way to the source of the Ganges River, and I was imagining that I would find some yogi teacher, and we'd go into a cave, and we'd meditate all day, and we'd learn how to levitate. I had those aspirations back then.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't really find anything.
Never achieved levitation?
Never achieved levitation, and all I found was all kinds of people that lectured to me how Indian spirituality was superior. So it's I didn't really, but it was fun. I have a lot of beautiful photos and a lot of beautiful backpacking experiences.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
It seems like you have a good perspective, humor and not taking it too seriously. And
I did take it very seriously back then. Just to be honest. Nowadays, I look back at it and It's nice.
Did you fall into join a certain teacher or group or religion?
Well, I was sold on different things during different periods. You know, I started with Vipassana meditation, which is very common.
Right.
So at first I was sold on that. You know, you come back from your first retreat, this is it. I found it. I'm going to meditate every day.
Yeah.
Have you ever done?
Yeah, I did one. The 10-day.
The 10-day.
And they're free. They're donation-based. They're really great.
Yeah. So I did 6 of those.
Jeez, wow.
And then, of course, I couldn't meditate at home. Like the 2 hours that they want didn't happen. And so I was into that. I was into Zen for a while. I was into, I was into Ajashanti for a while. You know,
beautiful. Yeah.
Read different people.
Yeah.
You know, very much into Enneagram for a while. Still am.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I tried many things.
And what about now? Do you feel, are you following a certain path, or how would you talk about that?
I would say at this point it's not following anything in particular. I have tendencies. So, you know, I reached my conclusion, I finished my seeking period, and it's more like I'm looking at what works and what doesn't work. You know, so I'm into inquiry. I've always been into inquiry. I'm very much into somatic approaches. You know, like not get stuck in your head.
Right. Oh, and so when you say inquiry, you mean like asking yourself who you are? Is that?
I did that. That I did for 7 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful practice, right? Powerful approach, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah. I was really big on who am I for a very long time. You know, really sit there every night, sit, and of course get nothing, but, you know, determined. Very determined.
Yeah.
You know, I do appreciate how determined we get sometimes.
Yeah. It seems like this question of like, is that necessary or not? But it seems like it's common for people to put a lot of effort into meditation, at least people who become meditation teachers or spiritual teachers, and then to reach a point where that is no longer necessary or...
Yeah. Well, you did ask if I have a path, so the one thing I can say I discovered is that the generalized teacher, the idea of like, I'm going to read a book and I'm going to do something general, that in my life, I haven't found that to work, actually. Like every time I progressed is because I met somebody who was paying attention to me personally.
Oh, wow. Rather than through a book?
Yeah, the books were, you know, books I more considered as confirmation mediums. It's like you read the book from where you are, and then 10 years later you read the book again and you go like, oh, that's what that's what they meant, right? So it's more like a confirmation. But the big transmission I got from I was working with Gangaji for a while.
Oh yeah.
So she was a big influence on me. Like I would go on stage with her and really just, she would correct me. Like I wouldn't even understand what she corrected, but I would come confused, and then I would leave the stage and I would know that something changed, but I wouldn't know what happened.
Wow. So you're on stage in front of a group of people?
Yeah.
That's intense, right? That amplifies the intensity of it.
It's very, but something happened, and then I would go and then I would work for a year, and then I would come back and get on stage again, and then she'd correct me until eventually I kind of like, you know, I could call it popped. You know, just kind of spontaneously figure out like what's happening.
So like a sense of clarity.
A new identity, or a deeper identity, I would say.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that's really I mean, you know, you study psychology. So
right.
It's the same. There's this whole idea of co-regulation in psychology.
Right.
Right. So we don't expect the child to regulate themselves.
Right.
And if we expected the child to regulate themselves, that would be like, you know, a little bit ridiculous. And so I think, you know, in spirituality it's the same thing. It's like you have to have somebody who's gone there before you to regulate you. You know, sure, I understand the whole Sadguru thing and you're your own guru, but I think when somebody really pays attention to you, it's worthwhile. At least in my path.
Yeah. I like how you're talking about that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes it developmental. It makes spirituality developmental.
Right, and it kind of, maybe that's a way of looking at the role of a teacher without getting into a huge like metaphysical thing. You know, I mean, it's maybe that they've refined their own intention to a great degree, and then they can put that on you, and from a place of compassion. And, you know, it can be a more simple thing.
and really care about you.
And actually care, yeah.
Yeah, when I work with people, I really have to care about them. If I don't care about them, there's not going to be any development. Like, I can't just sit there and go like, here's some sutras, read this, read that. Because they'll read it from where they are, you know.
Like, right, read it from where you are. Yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah. So for me, sutras, for example, if we were just opening up the spiritual book, sutras are confirmations. It's like when you've awoken to something, then you read the sutra and you go like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it.
Right.
You know. But during the path, it's more like you and your teacher, and he gives you the study, but then you won't really get it until something happens between you two or with yourself. So I don't see it any different than developing children.
Yeah.
You know, we don't discuss spirituality as developmental most of them. You know, it's
right.
It's this popping thing. It's this caterpillar to butterfly thing. It's like boom, it's gonna happen. Yeah.
Like you see it more as a developmental.
I see it very much developmental. Yeah, somebody cares about you, somebody loves you, somebody sees that you're lovely.
Right.
You don't see yourself as lovely, you see yourself as wrong, as imperfect, or you know, whatever story you tell yourself. And somebody kind of stays with you. And they know what you can do, they know how far you can go. And they love you and they trust you and they're willing to be there with you. You know.
Yeah. Well, like, I guess you're using the word spiritual. Like, how would you talk about that? Or, like, what?
What's spiritual?
Yeah.
Isn't that a good question?
Yeah.
I used to go around and ask people.
Now we get tested.
Yeah, I used to go around and ask people, like, what's spiritual? And people would give all, you know, I remember one time, one guy said, you know, spiritual means that there's a spiritual world out there that's separate from this world. And I was like, oh, interesting, you know. What's spiritual?
That's actually like the kind of a really old school way to answer it. That no one, it seems like very few people believe anymore, but that there were spirits, there were fairies, there were angels, demons, in some other dimension or world. And
what have you found that people believe in these days? Like, what's the trend?
Oh man, I think it's a word that gets used a lot and often without a clear understanding of what it can mean, and it can mean, like you're saying, so many different things to different people. Some sense of something connecting with something bigger than yourself.
Right.
You hear that in like a yoga class.
Right.
Your true self, or your, you know, in touch with truth, or there's a lot of different ways to be answered. God, or cosmic consciousness, or
It's fun to hear all the ways people, like, through you, all the people. For me, it's more, you know, I like to call it the geometry of spirituality. You know, there's geometry, there's a way geometrically that I see it, which is like, you know, you're like on a surface of a sphere, you're living a superficial identity, and then you're trying to get inside to like the center, to like the fundamental identity. And for me, that's the path. The path is, and that's how I feel it in my body too, so it's not just cognitively, which is like people come in and they don't know their deeper and deeper and deeper identities, you know. And that's also developmental, like, you know, I'm sure you, like, structure of the brain, right? There's the brainstem, and then a layer of limbic, and then the cortex is on top of it, and then the prefrontal cortex, right? So there's layers and layers and layers of development, and so we lose ourselves in these superficial identities. And my job is to help somebody go into deeper identities. You know, like deeper and deeper and deeper identities, and we unite there. You know, I'll give you a simple example so it doesn't sound so complex.
Sure.
Okay, so very simple. Like, I meet you on the street and I look at your face and I go like, oh, Julian, it seems like you're sad, right? Or happy. It doesn't have to be sad, but let's say sad. It's just easy for me. So, you know, the question I've asked people, like, how do I even know you're sad? Like, what's like, and I actually asked that in a forum once, in a non-dual forum, and somebody said, well, I guess they must have taught me that that's a sad expression. Like, it's a sad yeah.
Like someone taught them that.
Right.
It's a conditioning, actually.
Right. It's an inherent, you know, thing of what we are.
I've been reading and kind of trying to inspire myself to study more neuroscience, and there's this amazing book, How Emotions Are Made, and the whole point of it is that like we've been kind of wrong about emotion. Like there's something that we create and we learn, and they're not really universal. And yeah, it's like we get told like, okay, this happened, now you should feel sad.
Yeah, there is a debate about it.
There's a debate about it. Yeah,
there is a debate about it. I would say that my experience is that there's something about you that I already know. Huh. Like I didn't have to learn it. Maybe it's learned in the culture, maybe not. But when I meet you, and I'm very somatically aware. When I meet you, I know a lot of things about you, even if I've never met you before. Like you have your puppy here. I'll know when she's excited, right? I'm not going to confuse between when she's excited and when she's like showing me her teeth, right?
Right.
So there's something I already know about it because we share a limbic brain. I share my limbic brain and your limbic brain.
Yeah, like we're connected in some important ways.
Yeah, we're the same in it. My story of my life is different than yours, but the story of why you get sad is maybe different than how I get sad.
Sure.
But the sadness itself is very, it's the same. There's a sameness about it.
Yeah.
So right there, I'm connecting to a deeper identity. The more superficial identity is your story why you got sad. But the sadness itself is a deeper identity.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the anger, the sadness, the emotions are a deeper identity, right? I'm not going like, you just had a male sadness, or you had a Christian sadness, or you had a Jewish sadness.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. It's a
deeper, more fundamental thing that we all share.
It's more fundamental, right? And so in spirituality, you go down this layers and layers of identity into very, very basic, primal, fundamental things, and in those there's this beautiful unity. Which is like, I was born Jewish, so you go underneath Jewish, and then I'm not Jewish, I'm just a man, and then I go underneath man, I'm just a human, and then you go underneath human, I'm just an organism, and then you go underneath that, and you keep on going down, and then in that you start to find a unity, a sameness.
Yeah, and that's part of the process you would do with someone.
Yes. Yes, I start to go underneath the layers, I start to take them down the layers, because the first layer is the story.
Right.
And I can never unite with you with the story.
Huh.
Right? Your story is your story. My story is mine. We're not going to unite there.
That's an interesting one, right? Because we're all kind of living or telling ourselves a story in our life, and there's a school of therapy called narrative therapy where you consciously try to rewrite that for yourself. And workshops on that, and I mean that can be powerful too. Yeah. I mean, so what this word story gets thrown around, like you just mean like the thoughts, the way we conceive of our life progression?
I'll really tie it to identity. The deeper identities also have a story. So, I used to think like, that's the area without the mind, without the story. But the deeper identities have deeper stories, like your life story is just your lifetime, right? But the story of your limbic reality is millions of years old. It's in development for millions of years, from generation to generation, and then there's the story of your lifetime, particular to you.
Right.
But a lot about you is not particular to you. It's like generations before and evolution and all that.
Yeah.
We can connect to that, and then it's like it's a much bigger story than the story of my lifetime. Yeah. It's actually inspiring. Yeah.
It's a bigger perspective.
Yeah. And it provides that sense of awe to me. So I'll pause there, because that's where I really get the sense of awe, when I unite with like these deeper identities, feel the whole of my creation. I've had visions of my own creation, and beginning of the universe had visions, or coming out of the ocean as organisms, and really went through those, felt those. And then there's this deep appreciation for the whole process of creation. I sometimes sit there in like complete awe of like, how is it that I'm even sitting in a room with you and talking?
That's good.
Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good. Yeah, like all the things that would have to come together for us to be able to do this. It's really amazing.
Like, how many?
Let alone record it and share it. And
right. How many billions of years is creation from beginning to now had to happen for me to sit with you with two brains and eyes and everything, and in a room in Boulder to actually have this happen? It's quite a journey.
Totally. Yeah.
So to answer your question simply, is like spirituality for me is life's journey. When you unite to life's journey all the way from beginning to now, you sit with yourself one day and you just go like, wow, wow, I'm here, I exist. This is quite amazing. You know, I still get frustrated. I still have my own little kinks and, you know, and things that, you know, don't go well or do go well. But in general, there's this deep, deep, deep feeling of gratitude and awe once you get that part.
It's beautiful.
The bigger story of all of this. You know.
It makes me think of like a gratitude and awe just for existing.
Yes.
Rather than because you went out and achieved this or met these goals. Or
Yeah. I have, I've been trying, by the way, I really appreciate the question about what is spirituality, because I think that's a beautiful question. I think it's not asked enough.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just, you know, hang whatever they want on it.
Right. You know, I studied religion in college, for better or worse, and then it's like, I realized that like religion or spirituality, whatever word you want, is part of humanity, and it's not going to go away. Yeah. And I remember when like 9/11 happened, for example, there were all these like op-eds in the newspapers, and people were like, "We thought religion was dead, but now it's coming roaring back." And it's something about being human that we have that, even if we think that we don't.
Yeah.
Even the most scientific materialist person, like that kind of becomes their religion, so to speak, because it's a belief system that they see the world through. Yeah. So, but yeah, what does it mean? And I think maybe part of it is that it's undefinable. It's pointing to something that can't be defined.
Also, I think we want a deeper meaning.
Yeah, a deeper meaning.
Right. If all I have is my lifetime.
Yeah.
If that's the only story I'm running.
Right.
It's not much.
It's not much.
No, it's not much. Okay, I was born 1971. You know, I lived here. I have this. I've done this. It's not a big story. It's not a very meaningful story. But if I connect deeper, you know, it's a big story. It's and I think we want that. We long for this deep, deep, deep meaning.
Yeah.
That's why you notice that I keep on using the word deep.
Yeah.
And not up.
Not higher or up.
I'm not a higher self guy. No.
Okay.
Just to be clear, you know, I don't do the higher self thing. I do like a much more deeper, fundamental, more primal reality that we all have. You know, I don't need to become a bigger me. It's more like I need to connect to deeper and deeper layers.
Beautiful.
You know?
Yeah.
And then I have more compassion and. Like when do you get compassion, right? You don't get compassion when you're 7 years old. You get compassion after you've suffered. Right. After you've gone through life, after you've felt deeper layers, and then you see somebody else suffer and you go like, yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
I think that's an important meaning of spirituality, whatever else, that some compassionate energy and attitude.
Yeah. It's a natural thing.
So when you say deeper, it kind of, one of the things we talked about earlier before we started recording was not being limited to the human. Is that it's kind of where I feel like I'm following you. Like these deeper layers you're talking about aren't specifically human.
They're not.
Okay.
They're not. You know, the awakening is not specifically human.
See, that's an interesting statement.
Yeah.
That's a little
It's
unusual.
a human. Yeah. What wakes up is not the human. What wakes up is something wakes up to the human.
Oh wow. I like that.
It's a deeper layer that wakes up to its humanity. You know, it's like, imagine the subconscious that finally becomes conscious and goes like, oh, I'm a human. Interesting. That was my awakening, by the way. My awakening was like, oh, I'm a human being. This is cool. It's kind of an interesting way to say it.
Yeah. Almost like you're in a video game and you wake up to that.
Yeah, that you're like this organism here.
Yeah.
You know, could have been a tree, but apparently I'm a human being. I've thought, I can give you a couple more analogies I've thought over the years of how to explain the spiritual path in all kinds of weird ways. One of them was like, the spiritual path is the path of a wave looking for the ocean, or a tree looking for the forest. So you're looking for your own nature. You just don't know it, you know. So then we go, I want to be a higher tree. That's great, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know,
it's talking about something more fundamental.
Very fundamental, very basic.
See, and it's hard to, even as you say that, like this part of me comes up, and it's hard to just accept that because it's so simple, and there is so much striving and effort in our world, and I think we need, our culture, our society needs more of what you're talking about, which is effortless, which doesn't depend on your credentials or how much money you make and all that stuff. And
yeah.
I know that maybe that sounds cliche, but it's like we need to be reminded of this. Like we're suffering, people are suffering because of all these expectations, like running on this treadmill. And then we bring that attitude into meditation, into whatever. And
we're focusing on being a better me.
Right.
You know, which is like, that's great, but it really can't bring the whole meaning of feeling all of creation. So when you feel, think about creation of like, you throw a pebble into a pond and then there's waves, everything starts growing, right? So that's the universe. It starts from a point and expands. And then we're at the edge of that expansion. Right now we're talking at the edge of that expansion, because all the way from the center to now, all this had to happen for this conversation to happen, right? And so for most of us, spirituality is like, from this point I want to evolve. And for me it's different. It's like, from this point I want to connect all the way to the source. So spirituality is not a destination, it's a connecting to the source.
Right.
And if I can connect to the source, I can really understand the meaning of this moment, like, and how amazing this is. But if all I want is from here to move forward, I might become, a bigger wave or a bigger tree, but I'm not going to realize the ocean, and I'm not going to realize the forest. I'm not going to realize the whole of ecology that brings me here. And for me, that's the gratitude part. Like, if you can connect all the way to the source, you can kind of go like, on the one hand, I want to say very grateful and in awe, and also kind of go like, God damn, that's quite a journey. It's quite a journey all the way from that beginning to here.
Yeah, it is. I was gonna say, I could almost hear like maybe someone listening, like the thought pop up of like, if you just go into find the source like you're talking about and kind of relax and give up the effort, maybe you won't have the kind of life that you think you want, or that you won't, like there is a role for effort and for, I think this is like a paradox that I've struggled with personally, but like if you're just kind of resting in your own being, just being, that could maybe become out of balance, or maybe not. I don't know. Like there's great spiritual teachers who just do that, right? They seem like totally at peace, and they're not trying to get anywhere else, and yet they're not. If I take that attitude, I'm not going to have I'm not going to have much income. I'm not going to have a family probably. I'm going to have a business, like all this stuff that actually takes effort.
So I love that. I love that a lot. Except that in my experience, the way that is achieved is usually by somebody else looking at you and appreciating you.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and appreciating you and relaxing all these parts that are so conflicted and want to do more. And then start to open up for you how lovely. I've been using the word lovely a lot with clients.
Yeah.
I was like, do you know how lovely you are? No, I don't. Because they're all locked up in the personal story, right? Any parent who's ever seen a child grow, it's just lovely. The whole process is amazing. It's just like, wow, you see this organism, this was your child, you just grow. And so for me, one of the things I'm sad that people try for many years is that they try to do it themselves. Like, I'm going to sit there, I'm going to meditate, I'm just going to be okay with everything. As opposed to like, Julian, I'm happy that you're not okay with everything. You can do that, but come here. I'll take the reign. I'll be okay with you, so you don't have to do that alone. And then that starts to relax something in you.
I like that. So like the connection piece.
Yeah.
Being seen, being witnessed.
Yeah. Yeah, and somebody paying attention to you.
Yeah. I really appreciate you saying that. And I imagine there's people listening that could really impact, because our culture is so individualistic, right? We're so on our own, and so and I think it is it's difficult to see that, like, Asian cultures are very collectivist.
Right. Yeah.
So if you just take the teachings, read the books like you're talking about, and even go on retreats, and then you're sitting on your own, and then you go home and you're meditating on your own, I think that...
you're missing something.
Yeah, I think you're missing something. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think in the traditional Asian, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Tibetan, whatever context, there was a community that was so much a part of reality that it wasn't spelled out.
Yeah,
so like when they were writing down these great spiritual teachings, it was almost like, eat food, drink water, you have a community. Like, it's almost like that level of taken for granted maybe. And our culture is like so fragmented and atomized and individualized.
And they probably didn't have the same attachment wounds that we have.
Maybe not.
The being isolated.
Yeah.
Also if you look at some of the, the big spiritual myths, like Yogananda, for example, like he had a teacher that loved him. Right? Everybody always thinks about how he meditated in the cave by himself, but he also had a teacher that loved him. They were connected. He found that teacher from far away. He couldn't rest until he found his teacher. It's a love affair.
Yeah.
And so
there's like real love there.
There's a lot of love.
And was that before he meditated in the cave? I forget the...
he had a lot of periods with many teachers, at least according to this myth. I don't know if the story is true or not. You can never know, but it's a beautiful story. But even in that story, he had a teacher that loved him.
Right. I really appreciate you bringing this piece around connection, and ideally, that's what good therapy provides, right? Someone who really sees you. And a spiritual teacher should be that on a deeper level. But I wonder how many, I think this needs to be more in the conversation in the world of meditation and spirituality. I think it can easily get lost because you could fly 1,000 miles and go on a meditation retreat with a big teacher, and you could see them year after year, but you might never get this personal connection that you're talking about.
And I think that's what's missing.
Maybe that's what's missing.
That's what's missing, because it's a lot of self-reliance.
Right.
And then there's a lot of comparison to some ideal. So
right.
that, a story about the Buddha, a story about Yogananda, or Zen, or something, or levitating. And then I'm always by myself trying to, in my personal story, even though I had an awakening, like in 2011, and it wasn't until, basically 2017, where I was confronted by a teacher that said to me, "I love you." And that was like a big point in my embodiment as a human being, to actually receive love from somebody else. And that even neurologically corrected something in me. It kind of like something quieted down. Because until I was able to receive a love from somebody else, there was something there that felt alone. Like no matter what. And then when I received this beautiful love from a teacher, and then it was like suddenly like something opened very easily.
Wow.
Very easily.
It's a powerful story.
Yeah, it was, and don't get me wrong, it was hard. The first time he said, "I love you," I was like, "Go away." And
What was the context of this? Was it on a retreat or a meeting?
This was, kind of esoteric things that I did with the teacher, but we got to the point at some point where he just looked me in the eyes and said, "I love you." And I kind of I cursed back at him. I did. I was not having it.
Interesting. What was that about?
I was self-reliant. I'm going to do it by myself.
Right.
I'm strong. I'm going to do that. And then it opened up the vulnerability. And it opened me up to my humanity. Instead of trying to be a god or something. It's very human. And very vulnerable. And it was one of my most, formative experience that I had in my journey. Which is somebody said, "I love you," and was with me.
It really connected.
So powerful. And that's why when I see people who are self-reliant, they're alone in it. I'm going to sit, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to breathe through the nostrils, I'm going to read all the sutras, and I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. I haven't really seen that work. I really haven't. I mean, it has benefits.
I wonder if, to go back to that word spiritual, if there are spiritual entities, Buddhas, whatever you want to, gods, goddesses, if that could be, for some people, that could be an avenue.
A surrogate?
Yeah, I wonder, because there are stories of people having, these intense relationships with beings that they at least in their perception, it's not just their mind, it's something more than that.
Yeah.
I don't want to discount those. So.
I don't. Honestly, I don't mind. I don't mind that there is that possibility. So I don't say like, oh, it doesn't exist or it doesn't exist. I mean, if it does, it does. This is a mysterious reality.
Yeah.
It's just not, I haven't come in contact with it.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, honestly, I've seen people that love me that woke up in a dream about me exactly when something happened to me. So there is these connections that happen.
Yeah.
And I've seen all kinds of visions throughout my thing, but I keep on coming back to the simplicity because those are unique invitations. Mm-hmm. And it's lovely to have. I've had like tremendous visions throughout my life. But still I come back to like, holding your hand, looking you in the eye, self-regulating, investigating. I always come back to that. Maybe that's just my karma, my path in life, what I've landed on.
Yeah.
But I come to that. I come to like the simplicity of like, is it even safe enough for you to investigate yourself? Is it safe enough for you to come close to yourself?
Well, that's something that I've come to appreciate is safety.
Yeah.
Like that's a fundamental thing that needs to be there before you can really go inward or really look at things. I think a lot of people skip over that, like safety.
A lot of people do spirituality because they don't like themselves. They want something else. Mm-hmm. I want another version. I'm not into this one. Right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I had a guy once come in and I was like, so you've been seeking for 20 years, so why do you want to be enlightened? And he was very clear. He was like, well, I don't really like me. I was like, no, so you're running away from yourself for 20 years.
It's honest.
Yeah. So let me love you so you don't have to run away.
Something I've been doing with every single person that I work with is we usually start off with a little bit of mindfulness, like it could be 2 minutes or 5 minutes. And then at the end I say something like, thank you for showing up here today. Thank you for trying this practice. Mm-hmm. Can you send love and appreciation to yourself? Can you extend kindness to yourself?
Right.
And oftentimes that then becomes the rest of our time together, the rest of that session, because it's not easy to wish yourself well. And that's this wound that so many of us have. And
it's not easy.
So...
No, it's not. I couldn't. For years I couldn't.
Yeah.
I had to have another person administer it to me.
Right. Maybe that's what we need. Yeah.
Yeah. Once the other person kind of gave me that love connection, then I can do it to myself.
Is this a person you're still in relationship connection with? So.
Yeah. The only teacher that I tell other people is Gangaji. She was my awakening teacher, I would call her. Mm-hmm. So with her it was like, solid non-duality. Who am I?
Right.
And then the other teachers, and I've had several, were more, I call them embodiment teachers. So you can wake up, but then you still have to embody. Learn how to love your fellow man, learn how to, clean house, be in relationships, do all that. And so my embodiment teachers were the ones who were like, the very simple, I love you, holding, physical touch, all those things, And until I had that, I could wish myself well. There was something about me that I didn't like. Awake or not, I still didn't like.
Yeah. Right.
And I have kids. I see that with kids. Same thing. I have to tell my daughter that she's wonderful. Because she'll doubt it.
Right.
I have to install that in her.
That's good. Yeah.
Implicitly and explicitly, I have to do that.
Well, I guess the good news here is it is possible to reach that point where you actually do love yourself, and through that you can love people on a deeper level. Right?
Yes.
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Like this idea of trying to send out compassion and do good things for other people while you actually don't like yourself. Like that doesn't really work, does it?
No.
But,
I mean, what you're describing here is a continuum. So it's like, it's from one to another. Like, I love you. Then you finally relax, get to love yourself. Then you get to love another. And then it's kind of waves like that.
Yeah.
It's like a continuum.
Beautiful, yeah.
Same as language, right? It's like, if I didn't learn a language until I was 5 years old, I won't. Because it lives in the relationship. And so maybe that's a good point that we'll kind of say here, that a lot of the spirituality lives in the relationship. We think of it as just me and myself, and I'm going to transcend, and actually a lot of it lives in the relationship, the same as everything else. Language, co-regulation, warmth, teaching each other, on and on and on.
Yeah.
We don't exist alone. We exist in a continuum.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you feel it like me, no?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about before we started recording again was like this idea of you said that you worked with a number of like Buddhists, which I've had a lot of Buddhist teachers on this podcast, and people know I've been studying Buddhism for a long time. I thought you had some interesting thoughts about that, like that.
With the Buddhism?
Yeah, and like the idea of self.
Yeah, I love working with Buddhist practitioners, by the way. I love it. You know, I'm going to be a little bit cynical here, but I love it because there's these, first of all, wonderful people, so well-intentioned. Like when I get Buddhist practitioners, their desire to be compassionate and non-attached is like outstanding. So I'm getting like super quality people. But then there's this desire for perfection.
Right, perfectionism. Right. Yeah, totally.
So they come with a big desire for perfection, which is, in simple terms, I'll say it like really simple. If you if you have a strong desire for perfection, that means you're failing all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good statement for people to hear, yeah. And I totally used to be like I think I'm better now, but the perfectionism, that must be a shadow side of Buddhism. I'm not sure why, but it certainly seems like it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, it does. I can tell you a little story about a client that I had a week ago. You know, he's not a Buddhist, but he came and I said, well, what do you want for yourself? And he said, well, I want peace. You know, it's like here's a perfection again, right? I want peace. Yeah. And I said, well, that's going to be a hard life, because compared to that peace, everything's noise, right? So you're gonna always compare to this ideal peace, and then you're always gonna find yourself too noisy. You know, you're gonna meditate and go like, oh, I was almost quiet, but it wasn't quite. Have you ever done that in meditation? Right? We do that. It's like, I was quiet. I was equanimous. I missed it. Oh, is this it? And so I said to him, I said, look, you can't be at peace, but what you can do is be at peace with yourself. You can be at peace with your decisions and learn them and study them and see what you did and not live in regret. Yeah. But if you think that you're going to live a life where you're not going to get angry or upset or sad, then you're a little bit delusional. You know. So when people come to me with perfection, I go like, perfection is that's the doorway to failure. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect, but I can be at peace with my decisions and with my life. That I can do. You know. But
that's a good definition of maturity, maybe, or psychological health. Yeah. If you can be at peace with the decisions you made. Yeah. And sometimes you need to get angry, and it's appropriate. Right. Yeah, totally. So people come with that. They come with the perfection. You know, they come with write this and write that, and so you're constantly failing in relationship to that. And I have to kind of let them kind of wind that down and let them have their impulses, let them have their angers and their frustrations. I'm like, get angry, sure. Go ahead, you know. Well, this and that did this to me. Well, that's upsetting, isn't it? Yeah, so get angry. I'm like, well, but I'm supposed to be non-attached. I'm like, forget that. And so then they come back to life. And then I also want to bring them back to self. You know, because there's this ideal about like, I'm going to be this other thing. And I haven't found that to be the path. I found like, for me, the path is like, if you come to me, Julian, I'm like, well, let's talk about you. You know, I don't have to talk about high ideals. I'll get to the deeper layers through you. You know, I don't need to go somewhere else. Yeah. Like, because I'm doing depth, right? Because I'm going layers and layers underneath. Any doorway that we start is fine. You know. Yeah. Any place you start on the sphere goes to the center. But if you idealize something and you do no self, then I find you kind of get into this imagery thing. And then I like to go like, you know, I find everyone that comes to me to be not everybody, okay, let's be honest, but most people I find to be fascinating. Fascinating creatures, fascinating life. Yeah. And so I'm like... Yeah, you appreciate them. And that's interesting the way in your experience, you see people get into Buddhism, meditation, and they're striving for an ideal of no self. Yeah. That you see as kind of negating who they actually are, or something like that, or their own experience. Yeah, I want them to be interested in themselves, because I'm interested in them.
And I want them to close the gap between them and themselves.
So close the gap,
like unity. The counterpart of unity is like there's a gap between me and myself. You know, me and my subconscious, or however you want to. So I don't want me. I don't find me entertaining or lovely or anything, and I'd like to strive to something else. Common, yeah.
Yeah.
We've all done it.
Right. Yeah.
And for me, I want actually the opposite. I want to go like, no, go. Let's come close to you. No, but I'm mean and I'm ugly and I'm this and I hate people. I'm like, that's fine. You know, let's just come close to you. And let's have all the impulses come to the surface, and let's relax everything, and you can hate or be angry and do whatever you want. And I'm not going to judge you for it. And then eventually we start relaxing everything, and we start come close to self. And then we find that self actually is quite amazing if you just let it live for a little bit. You know, and not throw your misperceptions on it. You know, I'm not supposed to think like this. I'm not supposed to feel like this. You know, that's what we get into, right?
Right.
I that doesn't work. You know, I want people to talk about themselves. You know, awakening I call self-realization. I don't call it no self-realization. Right? To realize self, you have to come close to self, and to come close to self is not a simple process. You know, I'm guessing you can guess psychologically it's not, you know, there's reason why we don't come close to ourselves.
Sure, yeah.
You know.
It's I don't know how, like, you know, detailed we want to get, like, there's a lot of semantics that can come in, like self, no self, higher self, false self. I kind of have adopted this, what seems so true to me, and for other people I see as, like, these parts of ourselves, or sub-personalities, and so it's not, the self isn't this one solid continuous thing, but it's kind of discontinuous and paradoxical. And
you studied IFS, I'm guessing?
A little bit, yeah.
But they do have the true self.
Do they? Okay, I don't know enough about IFS.
Yeah, so even IFS has a true self, which is that there is this right impulse. You know, a lot of if you study some of the psychological, for those who know the different, like you study ADP or you study IFS, which I've read about and, you know, really curious about. There is that, like, you know, I'm hungry.
Right, truth.
Not like I think I'm hungry, or maybe I'm hungry. Is this the sensation of hunger? It's more like, and the same thing with boundaries, right? There's like, no, you're crossing my boundaries. So we get these strong impulses that usually children have uninterrupted. When we grow older, then we kind of don't know what to do with the impulses because they're wrong, or we're afraid of them.
We're trying to control all the time.
Right. Yeah. Because they negate the imagery that we have in our mind and how it's supposed to be. And so when we return to that, we start to, like, oh, I'm here in my body, and I don't want to eat right now. Right?
Some clarity. Yeah.
Right. It's like you can use. I love it how you laughed about this, because it's like, it's a strong impulse. Like, no, I don't want to eat, you know, chocolate ice cream right now. I'm not confused about it.
It actually can take, I think the example of eating is a good one, but that can be so, what am I trying to say? It can take a certain amount of clarity and really knowing yourself to be able to know that, because, for example, if you're really tired and you're sleep deprived, you can feel really hungry.
Yeah.
Because that your body interprets that feeling of tiredness as low energy, like you need food, and actually you need sleep. Right. Or you could have an eating disorder. I mean, so like our mind can become very convoluted with something that should be so simple.
Yeah. It's a complex. I mean, eating is a wonderful subject. We can have a whole conversation about eating, but, you know, if I can get somebody to recognize when there's rightness in the decision, then the rest I can just start to understand. Oh, I'm dysregulated. I'm tired. I'm this, because there's no rightness. So I'm actually not making a decision from self. Self is actually not here, and I should actually go to sleep and not make a decision right now.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how we kind of learn it.
Interesting.
And so it's like.
Well, how would you define self, since we're on the subject? Do you have something, or?
Well, self is emergent. We actually had a group about this, and we asked each other.
Oh, cool.
Before COVID, I was organizing a spiritual group, and we were talking about characteristics of self. So self is emergent. It tends to unfold. There's this unfolding property. There's something that you organize around, so I like to say even the galaxy has a center, and so things tend to organize, right? A tree has a center, a galaxy has a center, so things have a certain selfhood to them, which is this whole organization structure, organismically and like physically, and there's a felt sense experience of rightness to it. Like it's not in the logic realm, it's more like I'm here. And then again we go back to the depth of layers. It's like, how deep do I feel myself? Right? So I think I don't want to get too much into that, but most of society is living on self-image, not on self. And we don't know how to differentiate sometimes what's actually me and what's an imaginary story of me.
Right.
But if you have a good teacher, when self emerges, then the teacher will go like right there. Feel that. So sometimes you have to have somebody else point out, because you're like riding your own train in your own psyche very fast, and you won't notice the difference between self and self-image.
Interesting.
And so
the way you're using self, it's like a kind of authentic or
it's
true.
Authentic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And something kind of primal, like you're talking about hunger, like not a complicated story or a idea or an image. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's rightness to it. It's very fundamental. I love the word authentic, by the way. It's fully authentic expressing. Self is authentic, right? It's like you look at nature, it's authentic. You look at pets, it's a lot of authenticity. You look at human beings, we kind of lose it sometimes. So, right? Because we have to do things. We have to intend to do other things. So when you see it, after a while, when you know it in yourself, you can kind of see it and celebrate it in others. And I think that's what good teachers do. That's what the Zen koans, right? There's no right answer, but when the answer is authentic, right, it comes from a strong impulse. Then the teacher goes like, there it is. That's a strong impulse. And for the way they do it is the theory is that they tire you until you have to be authentic. Right?
Just exhaust you.
But self has a lot to do with authentic impulse. Like there's a strong me. You see this in children a lot. There's a strong me. A wolf in nature. An animal in nature. There's a me there. It's not confused about itself. Interesting, huh?
Yeah. And I think that's helpful, authentic. It's kind of one of those things, like you're saying, like don't think too much about it. Like you just are, or just do, just be.
It's hard to identify though after many years of not knowing we do force ourselves as culture not to be authentic. Like, who wants to sit in a classroom when they're 6.5 years old and look at a board? Right. Nobody wants to really do that.
No one wants that. Yeah.
So after a while, we lose the recognition. I think it's fair to say that authenticity is always going to be there. It's always there underneath. It's just waiting to happen. And so, but sometimes we just don't recognize it. So I think spirituality, or like a good therapist also is there to just go like, oh my goodness, there you are. Good to see you. Finally. Nice to meet you after 2 years. But so that's a good word.
Authentic. Yeah. Well, the other thing that we had kind of in my mind that we could talk about is this idea of non-duality. And you use that word, right?
I love that word.
You like that word now?
I do. I love non-duality. I'm such a philosophical geek. I love non-duality.
Well, what do you like about it?
I don't know. I fell in love with it years ago. I think I came to the States in 2001, and I got introduced to that probably 3 years later. And it's just like, from the moment I heard it, I just loved it, was curious about it. And, I can't tell you why I love it. I don't even know. I'm just really into it. And then over the years, with my love for it, I've tried to define it in different ways. I've tried to explain it in different ways. Yeah. Ultimately, it requires a deep experience to really kind of get it. But I don't know. What's your reality with non-duality?
I don't know. There's a famous expression like "not two, not one" that's often invoked, but you could look. I mean, just that we're all connected. Like that's a simple way that everyone can kind of like think about and understand.
Yeah.
Like I had an experience once at a hot springs where I was like going hot, cold, hot, cold, and the cold was this like basically a river, like a creek or river flowing by, and then I was just standing there, and it was like 0 degrees outside. It was like super intense Colorado mountain winter, and but because I'd been doing the hot and cold, it's like the temperature didn't really matter, and I was just standing there outside looking at the water, and this, more than just a conceptual thought, like that the water, because I like drink some of the water out of the creek, and just like, man, this water is everywhere, everything, like we're all connected by this water, and that led me to a space of feeling what I would maybe call non-duality. Yeah. It was an experience. I'm not saying it's like my reality all the time, but that was one way in which I got there. And I think our thoughts can help, like we follow a thought train, and like interconnectedness, interdependence, actually thinking about that deeply, you can come to an experience. Yeah.
And that's what the Buddhist,
that's a very Buddhist answer.
That's their expertise.
Yeah.
Like the layers of the mind and interconnect. Yeah, they're really good at that. Yeah. They're really good at that. For me, non-duality is identity. So it's like the who am I question. So it's the central identity, the identity that, in our life story, we don't have the same identity. So you and me are separate. You have your own story, I have my own story. My own life journey, you have your own. At the deeper layers, it's the same. For me, the way I name... So first I have to say, when I work with people, I tell them that at some point they will come up with a name for the primal identity themselves. So I have a name for it, but not everybody uses this name. So I've had some people, just to be honest, I've had 3 awakenings in the last 3 years. So
that's amazing.
I've helped my track record is 1 person a year. So,
the people that you're working with who have an awakening experience.
Yeah, who've had an awakening like mine. So there's different kinds, actually.
Okay.
There's the one that's the interconnectedness, and there's the one about the basic identity. So I'm more like of the basic identity kind. So for me, when I had my awakening in 2011, it was life was the word. So I had this raw experience of life force that was not subject to the Ori story. It was just life just by itself. Yeah. Through all its developmental layers, through all of creation, all that. And then for me, non-duality is what I am, you are as well. So this thing that I am, you are that too. Right? It's kind of like I have this picture of like a field of flowers. And one flower looks at another flower and go like, oh, flower. It's the same. You're the same. Even though we're supposedly different time of space, different stories, we're the same. And I call that the raw life experience. It's just life without the identification with Ori. So I've tried, I can give you different like expressions that I've tried over the years. Ultimately, you have to have the experience, otherwise it doesn't make sense. But one of them I like to say is like, life is not a journey you're on, but you're a journey life is on. Life is the journeyer.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It goes back to that deeper identity. Yeah. Something more than your...
Yeah. Ori is the journey. Julian is the journey. It's not the journeyer. Right? So life wakes up to Ori. Ori didn't have an awakening. Something woke up to me. Right?
I like that, yeah.
Life woke up to Ori.
That's helpful, yeah.
It's kind of like an ocean woke up to a wave, It's the opposite of what people think.
Right, yeah.
But you have to have the experience. And then there's a deep appreciation for just life. I have such a deep appreciation of life.
Does it feel like when you're having this deep appreciation of life, like it's something outside your skin, like the bounds of your body? Like if you see a tree or an animal or a human?
Sometimes not. But in general, all living expressions are, I know that they're deep. Like every living expression is a deep process that's taken millions of years.
Yeah.
Right? Every tree is like a deep process of moving and life energy, and life energy has intelligence. It's not intentional. Like we always think about intelligence as intentional. Like, we can record this session.
Right.
We're smart. And when I came in contact with the deeper identity, I really felt how there's this gorgeous deep intelligence that runs the whole thing, and it's not intentional. It's authentically expressing, gathers itself into an Ori, a Julian, trees, a planet, all of it. Yeah. How's that to hear all that?
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my particular, when I think about non-duality, I think about a very deep identity that I know that you are, and your dog is, and the trees are, and the sky is, and this planet is, and it's all this one thing that's expressing in a multitude. Right? So yes, it is, we are all connected, but the basic feeling is like, it's this one thing with a multitude of expressions, infinite expressions. Never stop. It'll never stop expressing, And
would you extend that out to the whole universe, like the other planets, stars, like it's
all alive.
Oh, yeah.
It's all expressing, it's all intelligent. It's all very much alive. And I am that. I am that thing that's alive. I'm not in it. I am it. I'm not on a planet. I am a planet. I am a planet talking in a room and doing a recording, but so that's the non-duality. And for the rest of my life, I'll scratch my head and I'll try to figure out how to invite other people to this experience. It's part of my engineer.
But so for you, it's an ongoing experience, like something shifted in your experience itself.
Yeah, never changed.
Day-to-day experience.
Right, never changed. My fundamental identity shifted. From that moment, there was a moment in time where the who am I inquiry happened, and from that moment on, the fundamental identity changed. Hasn't moved like in 10 years.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I think that's cool to share with people, that an awakening experience where there's a real shift in your being, and there was a before and there was an after.
Yeah.
And even if that's just a story, it's experientially like that, maybe.
Yeah. And there's don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm seeing lights or rainbows everywhere, or there's powers or anything. It's quite obvious, actually. The difficulty with it is that it's an obvious thing. It's kind of like when I had my awakening, and back then I was like, well, my first response was like, well, this is obvious. Like, why did I notice this before? Right?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Something obvious, something... Okay, well, here's another question for you.
Yeah.
The sense of being an observer, observing what you're observing, like, is that part of this process for you? Like, did that shift?
It's the death of the observer. It's often said, this is common.
Yeah, the death of the observer.
Yeah. Awakening is the death of the observer. Because the observer is always separate. It's always separate from what it's observing. So there's the observer and observing. Right. So
that kind of collapsed or fell apart or went away.
Yeah. There was observation, but there was no observer.
Right.
I haven't had an observer ever since.
Interesting.
Yeah. I observe, but I don't have an observer. Like I'm an observer and I'm observing this. It's more like, there's this dialogue of observation, and that's great, but there's no observer. It's probably a weird thing to hear, isn't it?
No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I imagine someone could be listening to this and they could think, like, why would I want that? Like, this isn't helping me get rich, get a Ferrari, like, it's almost like there's, in terms of spirituality in the world we're in, and there's so many coaches and spiritual teachers, and they're about going after these desires and getting them. And there's a massive shadow side to that, where it's like, we're not stopping and asking, why do I want that? Is this just a conditioned program? We're just these mindless consumers, and
drives me nuts.
Okay.
It does.
And then we celebrate the ones that got lucky and win the lottery and have the $1 million houses and all that.
Yeah. And then the rest of us live with a sense of lack.
Right. Yeah. This tremendous sense of lack.
Yeah. Yeah,
what you're describing is something so much more simple and something available to everyone, right? Like we could all have this. We could all.
It's very available. It's very, the question is, how do you get the awakening to happen? You know, as a former engineer, I'm constantly scratching my head and trying to figure out. Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel it's my responsibility.
Huh.
I feel responsible to help others that want this.
So you're really trying. That's what you're doing with your mentoring.
Yeah.
You're trying to help this.
I'm trying different mechanisms, and you can talk. You had Pierre here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can talk to Pierre about it. He's like he'll tell you about like what happened to him and how he changed and how he identified himself differently. Actually.
Oh, cool.
He's a good example.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not telling too much about him. I didn't ask him. But yeah, there's this fundamental shift that's kind of obvious, and it really brings you to a place that, you know, whatever I'll achieve is really nothing compared, you could say, to this achievement that I am. Right? This thing that I am, it's quite an achievement. This Julian that's sitting in front of me, it's quite an achievement.
Just in itself, like
in itself.
Yeah.
Just by it being.
It feels
here.
good to hear that.
Right? Yeah. I'm happy to feed it to you. Yeah, but it's just, and it doesn't mean that I don't have frustrated days, and it doesn't mean I don't have hard days, but fundamentally this thing that I am is, it's rich, it's a lot. This organism that we are, I just want people to feel that. You know, not what I can do, you know. I can do things, but that's nothing compared to what I am. You know.
Yeah.
And that's my longing. My question is how to invite people to that. Because I think everybody, like you said, wants to achieve.
Right.
But they don't recognize the achievement that's here already.
Right.
This is quite an achievement. You know, this talking, walking, thinking, feeling, hearing, life form.
Right.
And it's quite a thing, actually.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. You talked a little bit, you asked me at the beginning if I want to say something about psychedelics.
Yeah.
So the one thing I can say, I'm not saying that psychedelics create awakening. It's, you know, I can't tell you that it creates, but the one thing that I love about the wave that's happening, which is a psychedelic wave, is that if you take psychedelics in the right way in the set settings, you can reach a point where you're sitting with yourself and you're actually amazed about how much you are. Because it wakes the whole neural network up.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And then you're just sitting and you're feeling all the life force that you are. And if somebody can direct you, instead of looking outside, actually closing your eyes and say, like, notice how much you are. Right? Because in that realm you can really have access to a lot. Like, there's a lot going on, right?
Yeah, notice all that you are. Yeah.
And so when you asked me if I'm, you know, before this talk we talked about, you know, if I like psychedelics or not, I like them because in the right direction, I can see that you can help a person just go like, wow. You know, so somebody comes depressed, let's say, and people do sessions with them and help them, and then they open up and they kind of like blossom into their own being. And they kind of find like, oh, I'm no small thing.
Yeah.
I thought I was the small thing.
I'm no small thing. You know, this makes me think of what you were saying earlier about being seen and witnessed with another human.
Yeah.
And so to have a setting that includes someone holding that space, I think that could be, because there are, like you were saying earlier, like the same thing with psychedelics, like people doing stuff on their own, and that can be valuable, but you miss this connection piece that you started off the conversation with.
I'm with you. I'm on the same team with you. Yeah, that connection, that being with.
Yeah, being with.
To help them be with themselves, I think that's like really, you know, my heart longs for that for people. You know.
So I got a related question that I don't know if it's surprising to people or not, but I just did a training a couple weeks ago around therapy and psychedelics, and specifically like using cannabis as a psychedelic sacrament. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, it's I don't dabble in that, but you know, it depends on the teacher.
Right.
It depends if they love you, if they're willing to sit with you and see where you know, disassociate from yourself and where they can unite you back. Because you can go into that and you can disassociate, or you can use that as a coming back to you. So just, for me, I would think it just depends how the teacher directs you.
Yeah.
Everything has a benefit, everything has a shadow side.
Right.
It just depends what their intention, how much they also are in touch with their deeper identities. So
that's a good point.
Right, I can only take you as far as I've been.
Right.
So if I've been mostly to my narrative, then I can take you to a better narrative. If I've been underneath my narrative, I can notice where you get lost in your narrative and you're like, okay, go deeper. So it really depends on what the teacher has been able to do.
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah. So no other opinions about that. Good questions though.
Yeah. I guess I feel inspired after that training to I think we could reframe, have new understandings for the potential of cannabis. Because I think it's people tend to use it very habitually, but it actually has a tremendous healing potential if it's used in a certain way. Yeah. So I realized that that's true.
As long as somebody, again, I don't care about the substance, as long as somebody can catch you when you start to run away from yourself.
Right.
Because what will happen is, we can get to euphoric states in which we want to leave this existence and have another.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And if you start to go there, then you start to want that existence instead of yours. And that means that you're starting to signal to yourself that you don't like this. So you're actually subconsciously starting to dislike you.
Yeah.
In favor of a euphoric state.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
If you do that and you don't notice that you do that and you don't have a teacher that goes like, oh, you're running away from you actually, 10 years down the road, you're going to actually really be good at not liking you. It's
subtle, right?
It's very subtle. It's very I have do we have time for a story? How are we doing on that?
Sure, we got a few minutes left.
Okay. Yeah. This was, before I had my awakening when I was studying with Gangaji, and I would hang out with other students, and I remember this one student, lovely man, and he said, in 10 years I'm going to get enlightened. He did that. And even back then there was something in me that knew that was the wrong attitude, and I looked at him and I said, I think in 10 years you're going to be the best in the world at getting enlightened. Because that's all you did for 10 years. You're getting enlightened.
Wow.
So you get locked in this, I'm going to get there, meaning I'm not there. So while you're saying I'm going to get there, you're also telling yourself that you're not there. And so for 10 years you practice not being there. And you're just going to be really good at that. And so that's the subtle part that, is very tricky when we get to, especially to altered states, which is is the teacher going to point you closer to yourself, or is he going to let you run to things that you prefer to run away to? And he's going to celebrate you there, but not notice that you're actually distancing. Right? It's unity. If you want unity, you have to come close to you. You can't, there's no way. Let me say that really simply. If you want unity, you have to come close to you. There's no way to get unity by going somewhere else. You might have a good time,
right?
But you won't know who you are. You just won't. You'll become something, but you won't know who you are. You'll just become something. And you'll park yourself there until, if you're lucky, that'll extend for 30, 40 years, then eventually even that'll break down. But if you know who you are, then you're like, okay, yeah, it's breaking down. It's fine. It's okay. That's part of who I am too.
Right. Wow. Yeah. It's a good message.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta come close. Unity is coming close to ourselves. There's no unity out there.
Coming close to ourselves rather than trying to transcend or get to know self or negate yourself or all those kinds of things. Yeah. It's a little bit different attitude or direction.
Yeah. You go closer. I mean, think about it in a relational term. Like if I were to care about you and you came and said, I'm having a hard day, to unite with you is to come close to you, not to tell you to stop it or do something else.
Yeah, or to try to fix you.
Right, well, Julian, why are you like that? Don't be like that. That's not to come close to you. That's not to be with you. So same thing with myself. If I want to come close to myself, I have to let myself happen.
Beautiful.
Subtle approach, huh?
Yeah. Well, thanks. It's been great having you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's cool to have. I'm really delighted how easy the conversation here is, and
Yeah, it feels like we could talk forever.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to learn more about my work as a psychotherapist, meditation teacher, coach, public speaker, and all of that, I have a brand new website that I am excited to share. It is astateofmindcounseling.org. And if you'd like to support this podcast, we do have a Patreon page, patreon.com/astateofmind. Become a member, become a subscriber. We've got some benefits coming out for you guys. And another way to support the show is just to share it with friends, with family, to post about it on your own social media accounts. All those are great ways to support the show as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you here next time.